It looks like Terminator armor might well be seeing a new renaissance. For a whole bunch of different factions, Armour of Contempt is making them into an unyielding anvil that's almost impossible to shift. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought we'd do a special focus on Terminator armor, particularly as the changes to Armour of Contempt have really meant that Space Marine lists can tend to focus on Terminators a lot more than they were previously. I thought we'd go through the Armour of Contempt rule and how it relates to Terminators, then focus on a few specific factions that have really seen massive benefits from the change. Standard Marines, Death Guard, Thousand Sons and Grey Knights can certainly be looking at their Terminator units with a lot more interest. In the recent rules update, Armour of Contempt has changed so that anything that's AP-1 or better gets its AP reduced by 1 against most Space Marine units, though Custodia's Golden Super Terminators will certainly be gnashing their teeth at this, as their faction got left out of the changes. Admittedly, Custodians as a whole were doing a bit better than most of the other Space Marine factions before the balanced data slate, and Games Workshop chose to leave them out of this buff, as well as giving them a few choice nerfs to certain stratagems. Maybe not the most helpful, seeing as the Custodians Terminators already weren't probably the strongest thing that you were taking. Leaving that aside, the other Armour of Contempt factions already had Terminators that were kind of strong. Mass Deathwing was already very viable for Dark Angels, Black Templars with the Thunderhammers and Storm Shields and Relic Bearers were certainly making a mark, and the Thousand Sons Scarab Occult Terminators were already a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield and one of the stronger ways to play the faction. I did talk about the Armour of Contempt change in previous videos, but basically it's absolutely great if you already have a 2+ base save, and even better if you're a unit that can get even more buffs to that. AP0 weapons are already really inefficient against 2+ armor. Sure, you might be able to whittle down a couple of Terminators per turn with some seriously high volume fire, but they're rarely going to do enough damage to actually blow away whole units, and otherwise, effectively their durability has been doubled against AP-1 fire, you're saving on 2+s rather than 3s. You've got a 50% durability bump against AP-2, so saving on 3s against them, even out in the open, and a 33% increase against AP-3, where you'll be saving on a 4+ save. It's also meant that stacking Terminators in cover is more important than ever. Even if you can just get a Terminator or 2 nosing into light cover, then you could seriously increase the squad's toughness. If you can get a couple of Terminators into light cover, then you can take the shots on them initially. So say if you were being attacked by an AP-3 weapon, usually something that had cut through Terminators quite well, you could still be saving that on a big 3+ save, meaning that even dedicated anti-tank weapons are going to struggle to put these guys down. Every so often on speculation and wishlisty type threads, people often want Terminators to become even more indomitable and harder to kill, and it does seem that Games Workshop has granted people their wish there. As well as just making all the top stuff stronger, I do feel it might alter unit choices just a little bit. In particular, if you ever had Terminators that had the choice of buying in Storm Shields or not, it's generally just not really all that great a deal. Storm Shields somewhat mercifully don't stack with Armour of Contempt, so the only benefit that you're getting out of them is a 4+ invul save. Sometimes it is going to be relevant, but typically only on AP-4 and better attacks. Maybe not quite so amazing for the +5 points that it's often charged for. In general, if you had ways of putting good invul saves on Terminators, they're just a little bit less valuable now, as you might already be saving on a normal save that equals that invul. If we take a look through a few of the different factions then, we'll start with the Space Marines. I'd say for competitive play, the most played one was probably the Terminator Assault Squad with Thunderhammers and Storm Shields. They're really quite hardy, combined with other buffs, and the Thunderhammers will make them pretty indomitable either against infantry or vehicles. I feel that the balance might shift away from them though, as the Storm Shields are a lot less valuable, maybe going to slightly cheaper Relic Terminators, the ones that you can either choose to equip entire squads with cheap Lightning Claws and Combi Bolters, or upgrade to be a bit more armor busting and take Chain Fists and Combi Bolters instead. Particularly with all this high armor and Armour of Contempt around, I do feel that the extra AP on the Chain Fist is even more nice, plus the fact that their damage D3 against a lot of targets is actually kind of handy, as it isn't reduced quite as badly by -1 damage compared with Power Fists. They've got a couple of other decent upgrades, including potentially Reaper autocannons and grenade harnesses, which both seem pretty decent for the points invested. And Space Marines in general have quite a few different options to layer on Terminators. Rites of War makes them OBSEC, absolutely excellent if you're just stomping them onto a midfield objective and daring the opponent to come and take it off you. Apothecaries work great with any squad with big valuable models. They feel no pain and healing wounds don't hurt, but being able to resurrect a model each turn for a command point or for free with the Warlord trait That can be really quite important for jumping models forward, maybe decreasing charge ranges and things. Big meaty units can take really nice big melee or ranged buffs, and perhaps one particularly decent buff could be the Chaplain Litany for the 5+ Feel No Pain against mortal wounds, which is one of the best ways of dealing with Terminators now. If you're going for a full Terminator army, then I think you're going to struggle to compete with the Dark Angel's Deathwing for efficiency. With their current rule set, if you want to have an army that's basically all Terminators in a Space Marine force, then they are likely to be one of the best choices. Their Inner Circle rules means that you're only ever wounded on a 4+, great with all the anti-tank weapons that they're likely going to have fired at you. They can pick up -1 damage from their Relic Banner. They get objective secured baked in for free within their Deathwing detachments, and a few other really nice support things, like a mobile apothecary with the Ravenwing one, a useful assault doctrine to re-roll wounds against certain targets, and a rather excellent little battery of psychic powers, righteous repugnance to massively tune up their melee, a fighting last spell, and also stripping enemy obsec away, really quite nice when you have obsec with a massive durable unit yourself. It's certainly looking like the Dark Angel's plan of spamming 30+ Terminators onto the table isn't going to change too much. Otherwise, I think that Black Templars are worthy of an individual shout out as well. A big brick of Terminators can get a 5+ Feel No Pain with their unique litany. They're generally going to be well protected against mortal wounds. Helbrecht and Grimoldus are excellent buffing pieces for them, and I quite like the way that you can add good survivability with the Relic Bearer's special rule, say giving one model -1 damage, and then you can potentially resurrect that slain model from the dead with an apothecary. I think Terminators are just looking like a generally more popular choice though for a lot of other armies. Deathwatch can have them obsec with their kill teams and get them a 5+ Feel No Pain with their psychic power. Space Wolves have really great flexibility with their Terminator units, you really can choose to outfit them how you like. Blood Angels are a decent one if you want to start them off the board. 8-inch charges from Deep Strike and +1 to wound are very nice indeed. And White Scars might have Terminators competing just a little bit better with Blade Guard and Vanguard veterans again. Advance and Charge adds to their threat range, damage boost on the charge with their Assault Doctrine, and they've got a bunch of other really nice melee synergies. The change has also been a pretty significant shake-up to the Grey Knights as well. In general, since their Codex release, their Troops Terminators have been kind of overshadowed by Strike Squads, but along with the small points changes earlier in the year, I think it does make them compete just that little bit better once more. They're still going to have a decent chunk less damage output for the points, but particularly against high AP fire, the Terminators might have an additional edge now. Really though, I think the exciting thing for Grey Knights are the Paladins though. Grey Knight Terminators already are looking even more hardy than they'd normally be at range, with light cover from the Tide of Shadows, which stacks excellently on the Terminator armour. But the 45-point Grey Knight Paladins can also take a spell called Armour of Resilience for +1 to their armour save, and that does stack well with Armour of Contempt. It means you could theoretically be shooting a Grey Knight Paladin squad right out in the open, say targeting them with an AP -3 weapon. They get +1 save from Armour of Contempt, +1 save from the Tide of Shadows, and +1 save with Armour of Resilience, meaning that you effectively cancel out the AP -3 completely, and they'll still be saving on a 2+ even against things like las cannons. That is really quite mad, and it just means that unless you're in melee, you're very unlikely to do any significant amount of damage to them, and even then Armoured Resilience is still going to bite. They do have to make a few trade-offs for that. They can't take any of the Grey Knight Brotherhood bonuses, and they don't get Obsec innately, but you can get it with a nearby Warlord trait if you have a character behind them. And they're even a bit more resilient against mortal wounds than average with a 5+ save against them. Even with that on the field though, mortal wounds could be one of the easier ways to clear them. In melee they do strike pretty hard, hitting on 2s with a whole bunch of damage to attacks, and they will get a bit of Stormbolter fire and stuff as well as they close in. I feel like we're almost certainly going to see a fair few Grey Knights experimenting with Paladin blobs. If you play against them and you actually want to kill them, then denying that Armoured Resilience spell is going to be absolutely vital. It could be particularly painful trying to ignore them as well, what with Gate of Infinity having the chance to jump them around the table. Sticking with Psychic Space Marine Terminators, we come to the Thousand Suns. I think perhaps one of the best examples on the list where an already good unit has just been massively buffed. I would have argued that the Scarab Occult Terminators were perhaps one of the very best units in the entire codex already, and perhaps the one that you wanted for stacking a whole load of durability and damage buffs on the same squad to do some of the heavy lifting with those psychic spells. For only 40 points, you've got Terminators with objective secured and fearless at base, and they also get an extra +1 save against damage 1 weapons, so even really high AP damage 1 stuff is still basically going to do nothing. On the defensive side, they can also, of course, tow into light cover, which shouldn't be the hardest thing for them, and then if you did have a big block of Terminators marching forward that you really wanted to survive, you can make them -1 to hits with a psychic power, and depending on the size of the squad, it'll cost either 1 or 3 CP to get -1 damage against shooting. Absolutely horrible to be shooting at them with anything that's damage 2 or damage 3. Then you can either teleport them around the board with the Duplicity psychic power, or revive 1 per turn with the Time psychic power, and you could even have the Ardent Automata upgrade within the squad to help one model heal wounds each command phase. As mentioned though, they can do a decent amount of damage as well. They're actually one of the better choices for shooting in the Thousand Suns Codex as they're stomping forward. 40 shots with AP-2 combi bolters is good already, never mind Hellflyers or Soul Reapers. You can then get +1 to hit with Presage, reroll 1s with an Aura, +1 strength from an Infernal Master, and then +1 to wound for 2 CP. Provided you can stack a few spells with them with characters that are lightly supporting them, they should have a decent chance of chewing something up at range, and then they've got some nice generalist melee with a whole bunch of strength 5 damage 2 attacks when they do get in close. Perhaps even more than before, I think you could easily justify spamming 20 or 30 Terminators in a Thousand Suns list and having them do a whole ton of the heavy lifting. Finally, for unique Terminators to look at, we have the Death Guard. I did think about looking at Chaos Marines, but I thought that might be a bit redundant seeing as the Codex is just round the corner. Death Guard Terminators got not 1 but 2 decent buffs from the balanced data slate. They got Armour of Contempt, but also received Objective Secured as well, so parking a whole bunch of Terminators on midfield objectives can certainly do work. A few of them did go up in points a bit in the January chapter approved, but I think overall, in light of the 2 new buffs, they are much improved really. When an already very tough unit gets another major durability buff, things do get pretty ludicrous. Unlike the other Terminators, they're all Toughness 5 at base, so Strength 4, 5 and 8 weapons are going to have a bit more trouble. They get disgustingly resilient for -1 damage built in as well, so in general you're going to want to fire very high damage stuff at them. And like the Forces of Tzeentch, they also have a spell for -1 to hit. Arguably their 4+ invul is a little bit less relevant than it was before, seeing as you might not reach it quite as much, but still it does mean that even the most dedicated weapons for taking these out are really going to struggle if the enemy is firing really high AP stuff at them. I think still Blightlords and Deathshroud both have their roles. Blightlord Terminators are just the unyielding anvil that they can just stomp onto objectives and hold them against all comers. At only 42 points for this crazy defensive profile, they're going to be really hard to shift, but it does come at the price of them having relatively low damage output for the cost. I guess it kind of depends on what they're fighting. There's still going to be a fair amount of enemy units that can't really afford to charge them, just from the sheer amount of power weapon attacks that they're going to have coming in. The Deathshroud are a fair bit more dangerous in melee, with their fairly high strength damage 2 rerolling 1's plague weapons. I still think that we'll see them played in their 3-man squads, though they have become a little bit less relevant for their character protection rules now they only give Lookout Sir and don't give you complete immunity to shooting. The small unit footprint still combines very nicely with the Stenchvat's Blightspawn though, meaning that the enemy is typically going to be fighting last if they charge into them. So overall, just in general, Terminators are looking ridiculously tough to take out at the moment. Here's just a few examples of how hard it might be to take out some of these Terminator squads, and a few loadouts that you might see heading your way. A lot of these guys have pretty ridiculous numbers going forward already, but some of them have become truly ludicrous with these additional buffs. First up, we've got 10 Deathwing Terminators with the Chain Fist for 390 points, with a -1 banner from the Standard Bearer and a 6+ Feel No Pain for the Ravenwing Apothecary, who will also be healing 1 model each turn. I've done the maths here for just putting down 5 of the models, so making a significant dent in the squad. If you want to kill the entire squad in 1 turn, you'd have to double these numbers. Overall, you need 324 bolt rifle shots hitting on 3s, 108 plasma gun shots, or 162 if you can get the models in light cover. And still for the most dedicated anti-tank, it'd be 25 Dark Lance shots. The permanent transhuman physiology really comes into bat against them, having them only wound on 4s. Again, that would go up even more if they were in light cover, as they'd be saving on 4s rather than 5s. The Paladins are perhaps kind of similar, the same number of bolt shots, a fair bit more on the overcharged plasma shots due to them saving on a 2+ against AP-3, and a little bit worse on the Dark Lance shots, the extra saves not quite outweighing only wounding on 4+. Against anything that's AP-3, they really start to pull ahead, but I would bear in mind it's going to be a little easier to take them out in melee comparatively, due to them not getting the benefit of the Tide of Shadows. Moving over to the Chaos, say for example with 1,000 Suns we've got a -1 to hit going off on the Scarab Occult, and then depending on whether it's a squad of 5 or 10, you could think about the big -1 damage stratagem. It's really efficient on just 1 CP, but I think you could also justify it on 3 CP if you know that your opponent's going to be focusing a whole load of fire on that one unit. To kill 5 of those models, you need even more bolt rifle shots, due to them not hitting quite as accurately, and compared with the Loyalists, they're perhaps a little bit weaker to the plasma guns and dart lances, they're not significantly behind, and again are better in light cover. Out of all of these, they are certainly the biggest ranged threat as well, when they've got their buffs up. Finally, for the Death Guard Blight Lords, they're the very best against small arms, with bolt rifles needing 540 shots to put down 5 models. Wounding on a 5+ against Toughness 5 is a really big deal. They're still fairly solid against the plasma guns, but in particular they weather the Dark Lance shots really well. That 4+ invul save comes into bat there, as well as the fact that they're only being wounded on 3s, again due to Toughness 5. Overall, basically all of these are pretty ridiculous numbers, they can all do some crazy stuff, and if you want to kill any significant amount of them, you're really going to have to focus fire with a whole bunch of high strength, high AP things. Otherwise, mortal wounds might be one of your best bets if you do have a faction that can put out a significant amount of them. So overall, I wouldn't be too surprised if we see a fair amount of these different types of Terminators hitting the table in one form or the other. Terminator armor looks like it's really going to be something to fear once more, and works really quite well with the 9th missions, between the primary objectives being a bit easier, and also being pretty excellent targets for To the Last. They definitely don't seem to be in the position where they're just auto-winning things though, they've got everything else that's crazy in 9th edition to contend with, things like massive Tyranid mortal wound psychic phases, insane mobility of things like Harlequins, and the brutal high AP firepower that Tau can bring. I'll be interested to hear any of your thoughts about playing with or against the new Terminators down in the comments though. Let me know any of your experiences with or against them on the table. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying quite a bit, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.